Have you always known that you're on a soul path? And have you wondered how to gain real insight into the steps along your own unique journey? Welcome everyone, I'm Sarah Main, and thank you for joining me on Damayanti, the show for your soul. It's great to have you join me. Damayanti means deep peace and calm. Damayanti sheds a light for your soul through the gift of wisdom that shines in the beautiful and universal language of Sanskrit. Damayanti is the show that speaks to your soul, connects with your soul, and enriches your soul. Hey everyone, welcome along to Damayanti, the show for your soul. I'm Sarah, and today's show is The Silent Witness. The Silent Witness. We can live our lives trying to improve the stories we tell ourselves, but ultimately, is that our real purpose? There might be another path that leads out of all the anxiety, the rat race of getting and spending. So let's spend a little time talking about this. This is the silent witness. All right, so let's leave the noise behind and consider the great escape. So there's a beautiful story. It's a very ancient story. It's from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So imagine a beautiful tree covered in leaves and fruit and flowers, and it's abundant. And on a branch are two birds. One bird is pecking at the fruit, and the other bird is simply watching, witnessing everything, looking around, just witnessing. So one is pecking at the fruit, intensely focused on that, not looking at anything else, just the fruit, just eating. And one is just looking around, witnessing. Okay, so there are stories that we tell ourselves, right? The fruit that the bird that is pecking at represents the stories that we tell ourselves that we're eating. We're literally ingesting all the time. And these stories act as filters. And these stories are made up of the thoughts and feelings and experiences, and we weave them into stories. And these stories create our world experience. Okay, I've done a whole show on that. It's called The Stories We Tell Ourselves. And where I finished up with that show, The Stories We Tell Ourselves, is substituting, finding a substitute story for the negative self-talk and negative stories that we repetitively tell ourselves with uplifting, positive self-talk and positive, elevating stories. That's where we ended that. And that's a great shift, and it's a massive shift. And I've worked with, and I know people who have turned their lives around through just changing the story, that they are loved and loving, that they are worthy, that they are strong, that they are resilient. Their whole life has been turned around because of that. And someone who found it very difficult to accept praise, even though this person was incredibly talented, hardworking, loyal, effective, amazing person, but found it very hard to accept praise, genuine praise. But this person did spot that in themselves eventually and worked at turning that around, right? So they created a different story. They started telling themselves a different story, and that allowed them to turn things around, all right? And this does make an effect. This has an effect. It makes our lives better and happier. We feel more open, more strong, a better version of ourselves. And how often do we hear that phrase, a better version of yourself? And therefore, we're better for the lives of others with whom we live and walk in life, walk through life and journey in life. But let's consider a different perspective, all right? So that's one side of things, is telling better stories, better filters that are more uplifting and positive. But question, are you a participant in your own story? Are you actually a participant in your own story? Are you the hero of your own story? Are you the storyteller? Is that who you really are in truth? So today, we're going to look at the possibility of a higher self beyond the limits of all storytelling, the silent witness. Okay, here's a story. It's a funny one. There's a man dressed in this military outfit. He's dressed as Napoleon, right? And he walks into the office of a psychiatrist whom he obviously knows. So he's got the hat, the greatcoat. He's got his hand in his coat, just like Napoleon. He's in the full garb. And he walks into the office of his psychiatrist and he sits down and the psychiatrist says, so how are you going? How's your week been? And he says, oh, it's so hard. I'm having a really hard time. And the psychiatrist says, so what's the problem? And he said, I'm having such a hard time with Josephine. We're arguing all the time. She doesn't respect me. I'm miserable all the time. It's having an effect on the how effective I am to lead my army. It's really bad. What do you suggest? What can I do? And so the psychiatrist says, well, you can practice being present in coming to being present in the now, the here and now, in the present moment. You can be mindful. So, feel your feet on the ground, become aware of your body, take a deep breath, relax, let go of the stress, come into the present moment, and be here and now, and see if you can act effectively and not be so burdened by all the troubles that you're having. So he goes away and says, great, I'll try that. So he goes away and he comes back the next week, still dressed as Napoleon. And he's a lot happier. And the psychiatrist says, how'd it go? He said, it was great. All my troubles with Josephine, she seemed to settle down. I was able to communicate with her effectively. It's all great. But I'm still having trouble with my army. And, what can I do? It's like a real problem. I'm still burdened. And the psychiatrist says, well, what you need to do is give your attention to one thing at a time, not be so distracted by all your different generals and the army and the equipment and everything. Just give your full attention to one thing in the present moment now that you've learned mindfulness. Full attention. So he says, great. He goes away. Then he comes back the next week and he's much happier again. And the psychiatrist says, so how are you going? And he says, look, it's so much better, but I've still got some issues about Waterloo, the battle that's coming up and what we're going to do and all this sort of thing. And the psychiatrist says, right, well, what you need to do now is meditate every day, morning and night. You need to actually sit down and meditate, and then you'll be able to act effectively. So this guy goes away and he comes back the following week and he's really happy and he's saying, look, it's amazing. I've been trying all these practices that you suggest, and they've been really effective. But I've now got this issue. The Battle of Waterloo's coming up. What am I going to do? I'm concerned. And the psychiatrist says to him, look, I've just got one more thing I can tell you. And he says, what is it? What is it? He says, you're not Napoleon. All right. That's a great story. You're not Napoleon. So look, there are so many exercises and practices to make the dream more pleasant, to make the dream dreamier, so we can live in a more pleasant dream and to quell the monsters of the nightmare. But the truth is, we don't want to be lost in a dream, no matter how pleasant. The wise tell us we are not in truth a dreamer. We are not in truth living in a dream. All right. But the real kicker in the Napoleon stories, the wise tell us, is that we are not Napoleon. All right. We are not who we think and believe ourselves to be. Sure, we've got a name, we've got a form, we've got all of the sort of trappings of an individual. But is that who we truly actually are? Our role is not to ultimately tell ourselves better stories. They help along the way, but ultimately that's not our role, is just to keep telling ourselves better stories, to make the dream more comfortable, to make the story more pleasant. All right, to tell ourselves better stories. The true purpose of our lives is not to spend our time polishing the dream up. All right. This is from Shakespeare. Be not afeared. The isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not, ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again. All right. I cried to dream again. And that's the monster in Shakespeare's The Tempest, and he's called Caliban. And he'd only ever lived on this magical island. And he says, the isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not, ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again. All right, there's a lot just in that statement. All right. Our lives are usually comprised of running away from the painful and the unpleasant and running towards the pleasant and the desirable, while we run past everything else that we simply ignore and take no account of. Okay, just stop for a moment and consider. Our lives are usually comprised, most days, of running away from the painful and the unpleasant and running towards the pleasant and the desirable, while we run past everything else that we simply ignore and take no account of. We choose to ignore. And if we're honest, that's how most of us live our lives every day. All right. So this is a really important point to get. Are we a participant in this story? Are we truly a participant? Are we a hero in this story? And are we a storyteller? Are we the storyteller of our own story? So remember, we're normally running away from the unpleasant and the painful, and we're running towards the pleasant and the desirable, whilst we just run past and ignore everything else and take no account of it. So I'm going to stop for a break now, and after the break, we'll carry on with this and find out what the whys tell us about this situation, because here we are in this manifest form. I'm talking now, you're listening. But what's really going on? And for that, we need the whys. We need the wisdom traditions to tell us. It's in the scriptures, it's in the whys. I mean, here Shakespeare's telling us, be not afeared, the isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not, ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again. Okay, want to be trapped in that dream? Well, we want to go free. So I'll be back soon after the break, and let's talk about what the whys tell us about being free of this dream. So I'll be back soon. Welcome back, everyone. Today's show is The Silent Witness. And here we are talking about, what does the whys tell us about getting out of these stories? Are we really in these stories? Are we the storyteller? Are we a participant in these stories that we tell ourselves? Are we truly a participant? Are we a hero? Who knows? Let's find out what the whys tell us. All of this is unreal, is what the whys say. It's illusory and it's untrue, just as much as a dream in bed at night, a dream or a nightmare. It's all illusory, untrue, essentially a dream. We have passing, transitory experiences. We go through our day having passing, transitory experiences. And these experiences have no real eternal existence and significance. So we get up, we get dressed, and then that's finished. We eat breakfast, that's over. Then we go to work, we interact with people, or we might look after family or whatever we fill our days with. And then we go to bed at night. And then the next day, that previous day is over, it's finished. you'll never have that day again. So then it's the next day. So there's all these transitory experiences happening all the time. All right. They have no real lasting significance in and of themselves. This is what the wise tell us. So what is true? Who are we really and where are we? Remember, this show is about the silent witness. Everyone experiences some form of existential unease. It's there. It's a known thing. If you study psychology, if you study any do any personal development or anything, it's there that you become aware of this form of existential unease. It can be mild, it can be stronger. And in whatever form, it's based in fear and anxiety and dread and anger and shame and not fitting in and imposter syndrome on a fundamental level. And it's just there sort of in the background. All right. And there's a fundamental reason for that, because we are in truth limitless, pure, and filled with knowledge, consciousness, and endless bliss. We are in truth limitless, pure, and filled with knowledge, consciousness, and endless bliss. That's what the wise tell us. That's what the scriptures remind us of. That's what the wisdom traditions remind us of. And yet we seem to lack the means of living that way and realizing that truth about ourselves. Okay? While we might be inclined to ask, how does the limitless, eternally blissful, pure consciousness find itself living in Philadelphia, worrying about how to pay the rent? A better question is, how can we free ourselves from believing in this limited form? It's here, we need to take care of it, sure. But how can we free ourselves from believing in this and realize ourselves in our true state of pure consciousness? Happily, the wise appear to talk about nothing else. That's all they talk about. Okay, so let's go back to our original story about the two birds. So the beautiful tree, full of gorgeous green leaves and full of fruit, groaning, the branches groaning with juicy fruit, sweet fruit, and flowers, beautiful flowers. And there are two birds. One, and there's perched next to each other on the branch of a tree, and one is absolutely incessantly pecking at the fruit. That's all it's focused on, is pecking at the fruit. And the other next to it is looking around, just witnessing everything. So it's the second bird that we want to focus on here. In this story, the wise are telling us that we, like the bird, are the witness consciousness, the unaffected observer of our world, including our thoughts and our feelings and the events that we appear to experience. Okay, so when we take a moment and become present, we can easily connect with that witnessing bird, because that's who we really are. So how do we get from believing ourselves to be that pecking bird, sort of involved and trying to satiate ourselves with experiences, eating this sweet, juicy fruit? How do we get to a state of knowing ourselves to be the unmoved witnessing bird? The wise are always telling us about this as well. For example, the poet Rumi, I think I've quoted this in a previous show, but this is a beautiful quote about this from the poet Rumi. They have the work who have become desirous of the good. The rest are like children playing these last few hours before the departure at night. If anyone drowsy should awake from their slumber, he the nurse imagination beguiles, saying, "Go to sleep, my darling. I will not allow anyone to disturb thy slumber. But you, if you are wise, will tear up your sleep by the roots, like the thirsty man who has heard the sound of running water." So the drowsy playing children are those lost in this unreality. right? The nurse represents all the beguilements, the desires, the aversions, the hopes and dreams with which the world puts us back to sleep. The person that Rumi's addressing is the soul, who has become desirous of the good, who wants to wake up from the dream. That person has work, the tearing up of sleep, like the thirsty man who has heard the sound of running water. So the question is still, how do we do this, if we do it at all? In the words of the Sanskrit prayer, Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, lead me from the unreal to the real, lead me from darkness to light. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, lead me from the unreal to the real, lead me from the darkness to light. So how do we find the guide to lead us? How do we locate the path? How do we take our first steps? How do we stay on the path? There are so many stories in scriptures and books and guides available, like it's just everywhere now. It's everywhere. But let's look at just a couple of famous ones before we finish and end with a few practical tips. So the first is Plato's Cave, and I've related this on many shows, and it's in a chapter in my book. This is the classic one by Socrates. It's in book, The Dialogues of Plato. And this is the allegory of the cave, where the famous Greek philosopher Socrates likens our existence to prisoners chained in an underground cave who believe the shadows on the walls of the cave and the echoes within it. And they believe that all of those shadows and echoes are real. But remember, they're chained in an underground cave as a prisoner. And when one prisoner is miraculously released and dragged up a steep and rocky path out of the cave into the sunlight, into the reality, and forced to look at reality, at first he's blinded by the light and gradually begins to see things as they truly are. Right, that's a summary of Plato's Cave. It's teaching us the whole scenario of how to get out of this dream world. And other stories from the Bible, the prodigal son, who spends his inheritance on wild living and is finally impoverished and has nothing and is reduced to fighting pigs for their food, for their swill. And in that story, it says he came to himself. He's there in the pig pen and he came to himself and he remembered his father's house, and his father's house is representative of himself, the truth. And he remembered how even the lowliest servant in his father's house was in a better state than he was, and he resolved to return to his home. So what do these stories mean for us? There is a way out of fear and angst and anger, and we can move to a world of knowledge, consciousness, and endless bliss. And it begins with memory and knowledge, an aha moment, if you will, where there's a flash of insight that there must be something better and bigger for us. This sets us up on the path to find a teacher or guide. It sets that desire. It's called a good impulse, a shubhechcha, to find a teacher or a guide. And it also fills us with the resolve to follow their teaching. And if we stick at it, despite the path being at times demanding and rocky, remember the prisoner being dragged out of the cave in Plato's Cave, it's steep and rocky. And you know, the path can be demanding. The promise is held out by all the teachers, by all the guides, by all the saints, by the wisdom traditions, that we will come into our true inheritance. Oh, wonder how many goodly creatures are there here. How beauteous mankind is. Oh, brave new world that has such people in't. And that's Miranda from The Tempest, where she sees the whole world. She's been kept secluded, and then when she sees it for what it is, oh, wonder how many goodly creatures are there here. How beauteous mankind is. Oh, brave new world that has such creatures in't. Okay, so something practical. Mindfulness, simple mindfulness and presence. Take a deep breath, fall still, letting go of all thoughts and feelings that are playing through at the moment. Just let them rise and pass. Be present, watching all thoughts, feelings, and sensations rise and fall, come and go, watching, witnessing. And that which is watching cannot be that which is being watched. So just come into the present moment and connect with that ever-present witness. That's the best practice, and it's absolutely well worth it. And no effort on this path is ever lost. So if you want some energetic reminders to support your memory, go to my website, damayanti.store. I'm wearing my Satya necklace, and Satya means truth in beautiful Sanskrit. And it reminds me, it's an energetic reminder that I keep with me. And I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And I also have an Etsy store with wonderful, fun things, fun merch that you can get. All Things Eternal shop on Etsy. And there's great, positive, motivational reminders there. And let's finish with some beautiful Sanskrit to uplift our souls. So thanks for being with me today. And let's finish with the invocation to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Lead me from the unreal to the real. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. May peace and peace and peace be everywhere. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you for spending time with me on Damayanti, the show for your soul. To find out more about Damayanti or to get my book, Conscious Confidence, Use the Wisdom of Sanskrit to Find Clarity and Success, or to purchase my range of beautiful spiritual jewelry, go to my website, damayanti.store. That's damayanti.store. See you next time.